Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Amy Fisher. I'm the General Counsel of the Port Authority, and I'm here this evening to be the hearing officer. With me to my right is Vice Chairman of the Board of Commissioners, Jeff Linford, and to my left is Commissioner Michelle Richardson. They both serve on the Board of Commissioners, this agency's governing body. We are holding this hearing for public comment because the Port Authority is considering the proposed capital plan for 2026 to 2035, the proposed 2026 budget, as well as proposed changes in tolls and fares for the use of our vehicular tunnels and bridges and passenger rail facilities, and changes to the airport ground transportation access fees and our bus terminal fees. We have prepared materials to assist in explaining these proposals, including a written handout, which you can find at the entrance to this hearing room. We will also shortly show a presentation describing the proposals. If there's something in the presentation you would like to hear again, it can also be accessed on the Port Authority's website at panyj.gov/public hearings. The hearing will begin shortly after this presentation.
Founded more than a century ago, the Port Authority's mission is to keep the region moving. With a broad array of assets across the region, from airports to seaports, the PATH train, our bridges and tunnels, and the World Trade Center campus, the Port Authority is committed to keeping the region moving. Today, we'll review the Port Authority's proposed 2026 to 2035 capital plan, which builds on the strong momentum set in the previous capital plan to deliver the next generation of best-in-class infrastructure that will continue to advance the region. The Port Authority is financially self-sustaining. It receives no funding from either state and relies on raising the needed funds to construct, operate, and improve its facilities. The past 5 years have presented unique challenges to the Port Authority's operating environment, including revenue impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, macroeconomic trends including inflation and tariffs, and rising interest rates. Despite these headwinds, the Port Authority drove the ambitious 2017 to 2025 capital plan forward to deliver transformative infrastructure projects across the region, including delivering key aspects of the transformation of the region's 3 major airports, including best-in-class facilities like the new LaGuardia and a new Terminal A at Newark. Rebuilding of the Goethals Bridge, and advancing the $11 billion Midtown bus terminal replacement. Critical projects, including the raising of the Bayonne Bridge to increase the capacity of cargo movement at the seaport. Infrastructure investments and expanded capacity across the PATH system, and revitalization of the World Trade Center complex. It was a decade of achievement, but we're not done yet. The Port Authority has proposed an ambitious $45 billion capital plan that continues this unprecedented rebuilding program while maintaining our world-class standard and creating economic opportunity for the region. The 2026 to 2035 capital plan proposes $20 billion in spending across the airports, including the completion of an unprecedented transformation at JFK, including major terminals and brand new airtrain cars and stations. At Newark Liberty, completing the replacement of the airtrain and delivering an all-new Terminal B to bring every aspect of the airport up to the same world-class standard set by the award-winning Terminal A. And at LGA, replacing the 85-year-old Terminal A and vastly improving Q70 LGA Link bus access to the airport. These transformational projects in the proposed 2026 to 2035 capital plan are largely funded by private investments, cost recoveries, lease revenues, and fees, which make up 2/3 of our revenues. To support delivery of these ambitious goals, the capital plan proposes changes to airport access fees for for-hire vehicles and for taxis, which will be aligned with fees at peer airports across the country. The proposed modification would increase access fees for for-hire vehicles from $2.50 for each pickup and drop-off to $5 for each pickup and drop-off, effective March 15, 2026. The proposed modification would also increase airport access fees charged to taxis, which are currently $1.75 per pickup. Pickup fees for taxis would increase by 25 cents on March 15, 2026, with further 25-cent increases for each of the 2 following years. The proposed 2026 to 2035 capital plan would drive completion of an $11 billion best-in-class midtown bus terminal. Completed in 2 phases over the next 10 years, the inspiring, light-filled transit hub of the future will serve the needs of both the commuters and the community. To provide important support for the cost of building, operating, and maintaining this world-class facility, the 2026 to 2035 capital plan proposes updated carrier fees charged to bus companies operating at the Midtown bus terminal. Bus toll structures, which currently group all buses together, would be separated into 3 classes based on vehicle type: minibuses, 2-axle buses, and 3-axle buses. The proposed 2026 to 2035 capital plan would also drive $4.4 billion in state of good repair spending to ensure the resiliency of our crossings for another century, including advancing the comprehensive rebuild of the George Washington Bridge, extensive rehabilitations to the Outer Bridge Crossing and Lincoln Tunnel Helix, and planning for the future replacement of these assets in the 2036 to 2045 capital plan period. To support these critical tunnel and bridge investments, the 2026 to 2035 capital plan proposes phasing out the current $2 Easy Pass discount for autos and motorcycles offered during off-peak hours. The phase-out would take place at 50 cents per year, starting in 2027, and last 4 years. The discount program at the Staten Island bridges would remain unchanged. The truck discount at off-peak hours would remain unchanged, and the calculation of the Easy Pass peak rate for autos would remain unchanged. At the Path Commuter Rail System, the 2026 to 2035 capital plan proposes more than $2 billion in key investments, including continued restoration of all tracks, installation of state-of-the-art anti-evasion fare gates, and support for major service increases. Under the proposed capital plan, for the first time in 25 years, all 4 path lines would operate 7 days a week in 2026 and offer major service increases, a direct response to feedback from the community calling for increased weekend service levels, including late-night service, and increased service during the weekday rush hours. To support these improvements, the 2026 to 2035 capital plan proposes a fare increase of 25 cents beginning in spring 2026, with additional 25-cent increases each January from 2027 through 2029. PATH's operations are unique. The PATH system receives no state or federal funding and subsidizes 75% of each PATH ride. The proposed increase in fares would provide critical funding for the proposed increases to PATH service. The capital plan we have put forward is a transformational, once-in-a-generation proposal. Every dollar in the proposed plan goes back into visible, tangible improvements that make the region and residents' lives better. We have proven, through the completion of the 2017 to 2025 capital plan, that we are capable of delivering major projects for the region. That ambition continues in the proposed 2026 to 2035 capital plan. Completing priority initiatives and advancing a new generation of projects that will modernize, strengthen, and expand the agency's infrastructure around the region. In addition to today's public hearing, there are numerous ways for the public to offer their feedback. Comments will be reviewed by the Port Authority Board of Commissioners prior to a final publication and adoption of the proposed 2026 to 2035 capital plan.
Thank you for watching. We're interested in what you have to say today. Comments today will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The commissioners are here to listen, but there won't be a back-and-forth conversation today. We have a clock to keep track of things so we know when the 3 minutes elapse, and you will get a warning when you're getting close to the end of your comment time. We will hear first from those present tonight in person, and then we'll go to those who are participating virtually. If you'd like to provide additional comments after this hearing, there are a number of ways for you to do that, as was mentioned in the video. First, you can go to our website, panyj.gov/public hearings, and make written comments there. You may also mail written comments addressed to Public Hearing Comments, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, 4 World Trade Center, 23rd floor, New York, New York, 10007. And in addition, you may provide comments regarding these matters at the December 18th, 2025 Board of Commissioners meeting at 2 Montgomery Place, Jersey City, New Jersey, which is scheduled to begin at approximately 1 p.m. All public comments made in any forum on the matters described above will be transcribed and also summarized by Port Authority staff and retained by Port Authority for consideration by the full Board of Commissioners. We will now begin the public hearing portion of this meeting. I would ask if Anna Humphrey is in the room.
Good evening. My name is Anna Humphrey, and I'm here on behalf of the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York, Sydney, and all New Yorkers with disabilities who rely on public transit every day. I'm here to urge that you include funding for elevators in New York City PATH stations in the new capital plan. Right now, only 2 PATH stations in New York City are fully accessible. That means that 2/3 of these stations remain off limits to people with mobility disabilities, parents with strollers, and travelers with luggage. And this isn't just a problem with the PATH stations. This mirrors the inaccessibility crisis already happening in New York City's subway system. Today, only 112 out of 472 subway stations are accessible. That means nearly 80% of the subway system, or 360 stations, are unusable for people with mobility disabilities. And even among these few accessible stations, outages are constant. There are roughly 25 elevator outages every single day. New Jersey PATH stations are currently accessible, but once you cross the river into Manhattan, the system abruptly becomes unusable for thousands of riders. It's hard to justify that kind of inconsistency, especially in a region where transportation systems are supposed to work together. And let's be honest, it's not that the Port Authority doesn't have the capacity to deliver major infrastructure. Over the past decade, the agency has spent $50 billion rebuilding the region's airports and begun an $11 billion new bus terminal. But during that same period, nothing has been done to make PATH stations accessible in New York City. The current system isn't just inconvenient for people with disabilities, it creates barriers to employment, medical care, and connection to city life. We know the public impact. According to a mobility survey conducted by the New York City DOT, 71% of weekday trips in New York City rely on the subway, but only 5% of people with disabilities are able to use it. This tells thousands of residents, workers, and travelers that this system wasn't built for them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Joseph Rappaport.
Thank you. I'm Joe Rappaport, the Executive Director of the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled, BCID. BCID is part of the disability-led independent living movement. We provide services and advocate on behalf of disabled people across the city and around the state. The Port Authority's capital program has an extraordinary flaw. It has not even a penny to make New York City's 4 inaccessible PATH stations accessible. Those stations, 9th Street, 23rd Street, Christopher Street, and 14th Street, remain out of reach for New York and New Jersey residents and visitors a full 35 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act passed. The lack of access on PATH shuts out people with mobility disabilities from PATH or causes them to travel long distances to get to the World Trade Center or 33rd Street, the 2 accessible stations in New York City. And it makes it more difficult for people with strollers, travelers, and others to travel on path. That's just wrong and unfair. Over the last 10 years, as you heard from my colleague, the port has spent $50 billion to rebuild the region's 3 major airports. It started in $11 billion, $10 billion, whatever the number is, new bus terminal. But you've done nothing to make the path system more accessible here in New York City. Meanwhile, the MTA settled lawsuits brought by BCID and Sydney and other organizations and individuals that require it to make hundreds of its subway stations accessible over the next couple of decades. In the last capital program, the MTA allocated $5.2 billion and moved forward with making 67 of its 472 stations accessible. As my colleague Anna Humphrey mentioned, there's a long way to go, but at least they're doing something the port isn't. If the MTA can do 67 stations, the Port Authority can do 4. It's long past due. And why wouldn't you want to make sure that all New Yorkers and New Jerseyans can travel on your system? We'd be happy to sit down and discuss with you just how to move forward to make this happen. But the first step is for you to revise the $45 billion capital program to include accessibility at these 4 stations in New York City, along with looking at how you can improve the accessibility of the path's 8 New Jersey stations beyond the elevator replacements you're already planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Valdez.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Valdez, and I'm here to urge the Port Authority to revise its capital program to make sure every single PATH station in New York City is fully accessible. Let me tell you what accessible train stations really mean for someone like me who uses a wheelchair. For me, accessibility is not a luxury. It's not a convenience. It is the difference between being included in my community or being shut out of it. When a train station is accessible, it gives me something that many people take for granted every single day: the ability to show up to work, to show up for my family, to show up to appointments, to show up for just life. When a station isn't accessible, it feels like the city is telling me, you don't belong here. I shouldn't have to feel that just because I roll instead of walk. And now the PATH system and the Port Authority are saying, you don't belong here. It's shocking that your capital program doesn't include plans to make the New York City PATH stations accessible. It's shocking that you can completely redo airports and bus stations and not include accessibility on PATH. Accessibility benefits everyone who rides or wants to ride the PATH system. Elevators help seniors, parents with strollers, travelers with luggage, and people with temporary injuries. Accessibility is not about special treatment, it's about basic fairness. In other words, accessibility is not a special request, it's an investment that improves the system for everyone. I would like to repeat myself. When we talk about accessibility, we're talking about my right to live my life without being blocked by physical constraints. We're talking about dignity, we're talking about equality. We're talking about the fundamental right to move freely through the place we call home. And we're talking about something you have the power to change by revising your capital program. And I urge you to take action before your vote later this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Astor.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Astor. I'll be testifying on behalf of the Office of the New York City Comptroller Brad Lander. Comptroller Brad Lander believes that the Port Authority should dedicate funding in its 2026-2035 capital plan to accessibility improvements in the 9th Street Station, the 23rd Street Station, the Christopher Street Station, and the 14th Street Station. PATH's 8 New Jersey stations are accessible, but nothing has been done to make the PATH system more accessible here in New York City. The lack of accessible PATH station make it harder for people with disabilities, people with strollers, and even individuals with heavy carts or suitcases to travel through the system. It's also one of the cheapest ways to commute between New York and New Jersey, making it ideal for people with disabilities who tend to have limited income and rely on the social safety net. But due to the lack of accessibility throughout the New York system, it is an unideal way to commute for many people with disabilities. Accessibility goes beyond elevators. It means making it so that the gaps between the train and the platform are closer together, and they should be in accordance with federal guidance as well as other city and state guidances as well. They should also have tactile platforms so that folks with visual impairments are able to navigate through the system, as well as audible and clear announcements and communications for folks who also have visual impairments. Port Authority should follow the MTA's lead. In its last capital plan, the MTA allocated $52 billion and move forward with making 67 of its 472 stations accessible. If the MTA can make 60 stations accessible in its 2025-2029 capital plan, the Port Authority can make 4 stations accessible in this plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sean Scott?
Hi, good evening, and thank you for taking public comment. I'm Sean Scott here in my personal capacity. I'm excited about the air train expansions at JFK and the Newark build. I frequently fly out of Newark, and I've noticed 2 things. One is when I do take a car, it tends to be very congested, and I think the Port Authority is aware of the car congestion at the airports. I'm sure that's part of the plan. I've also noticed that the air train costs $8.50, and even with the for-hire cost increase to $5, that's still cheaper than taking public transit. So to me, there's a little bit of an irony there for charging cars less than public transit passengers while dealing with congestion. So I'd love to see the capital plan reflect that, both with making sure that if we were able to make the air train free, that it can accommodate a full terminal worth of passengers, unlike the current Newark air train, and then potential tolling infrastructure for cars, not just for hire vehicles. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak who hasn't been heard? Okay, we're going to go to the folks on the phones. Leslie Manning.
Hello, this is Leslie Manning, and I'm responding on behalf of the Pan Am Museum Foundation, specifically to address the proposed adoption of a replacement of Terminal A at LaGuardia Airport. I would like to know and have confirmation from the Port Authority that you have cleared this with the New York City Landmark Preservation Committee and the National Trust for Historical Preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne Abraham. Nina Driesen. Jenny Fratsky.
Yes, please.
Go right ahead.
I would like to say that the historical Marine Air Terminal is a national treasure that deserves preservation and respect for future generations. I am a former Pan American flight attendant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fernando Metza. Mark Klein, Arturo Arbaje, Jalen Morales, Kelsey Calandra, John Cortez, Jennifer Gregory, Stephanie Puckhaber, Paul Spiteri, Ralph Ramsey, Patrick O'Hara.
Hello.
Hi.
You hear me?
Yeah?
Okay. Thanks. The Port Authority's proposed operating budget and capital program advance, a lot of great projects and improvements for the region. But the cost for these efforts shouldn't fall largely on the shoulders of transit riders, with the pretty dramatic proposed increases in path fares, bus tolls, and carrier fees at the terminals. The proposed improvements to PATH service are very welcome and long overdue. However, when you look at the total service hours PATH will be running over the course of a week with the proposed improvements, compared to the total service hours PATH was running before the pandemic, the total increase in service hours is less than 1%. While the proposed weekend service increases are significant, PATH is, and even with these changes, will still be running less rush hour service than they were in 2019, and weekday off-peak service levels have been cut by 20% since 2019. In light of this and the fact that the Port Authority already has implemented inflation-based fare adjustments that have addressed inflation since 2019, the proposed 33% PATH fare increase is not at all commensurate to a 1% increase in total service hours. Further, the Port Authority shouldn't really be seeking approval now for fare increases more than 3 years from now. Instead, PATH should see how ridership levels respond to the increased service, work more aggressively to reduce costs, come up with more creative ways to incentivize and discount fares for more frequent travelers, and then come back next year and the year after if fares still need to increase. In a similar vein, the large increase in bus tolls and bus terminal fees will fall largely on the shoulders of transit riders. Keeping the cost of Transhuts and bus and PATH travel affordable helps reduce congestion on the bridges, tunnels, approach roadways, and all the local streets in both states, and delivers far better value for the people of New York and New Jersey. So the Port Authority should reconsider some of the degree of these proposed increases to PATH fares and bus tolls, defer some of the out-year increases, and instead look for ways to increase revenue to fund these projects and these service improvements without raiding the wallets of transit riders. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize in advance for getting this pronunciation wrong. Guy Leo. Okay. Brian McLaughlin. Jeffrey Geary. Liliana Petrova, Jeffrey Arend,
great people, including Marie LaGuardia, legendary Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia's widow, and she was tremendously helpful with the manager, Tim Pierce. He used to drive her to our Kiwanis Club meetings to try to help save the Marine Terminal in 1980. She told me Butch always loved the Marine Air Terminal. He would pay surprise visits there to make sure the place was spick and span. I respectfully point out the Marine Air Terminal is a treasure that belongs to the people of the city of New York. The Port Authority reality is that they're caretakers of that historic and important to aviation structure. In 1980, MAT, Inside and Out, was declared a landmark. Can only wonder, as caretakers, How can somebody avoid a big mistake like the Port Authority seems to be headed toward? Sometimes you don't know what you have until you lose it. Maybe some brief words for MAT could be helpful. Outside and all around the marine terminal is a classical understated beauty. Here, lyrical golden flying fish encircle and dance around the space inside a band and suggest a playful vibe around the entire oval exterior of the building. Walking out front as you move toward the MAT, as we airport people call the place, you're immediately aware that the building itself is welcoming you, and since 1940 has gently inspired your aerial adventure from the ground up. Just below the oval stainless canopy above the entrance doors are stylized stainless steel wings suggesting flight. Above the canopy, the view behind a window wall suggests another aspect of your adventure, as a stainless steel stairway to the stars climbs all the way to the upper floors and observation wings of the MAT. Upstairs, be sure and visit the tiny stainless steel control tower that guided the flying boats out of Bowery Bay under the Whitestone Bridge for takeoff during those early night flights to Europe and Azores and Shannon, where they ended up going. Inside the MAT, the mural Flight was painted on Belgian linen, and Brooks worked for 2 years to do it. But he also brought the outside of the building in by creating art panels that included what he observed, along with hundreds and thousands of aerial passenger pioneers who watched the world take off from those wings of the MAT. That's how there's a picture of a man pulling a rope, life-size, in his mural. It's been immortalized. Another panel over the entrance has some Hamilton Standard propellers. Those were the propellers on the flying boats. And if you look at another part of the mural, there's a little tiny airplane in there with no propellers. Look, keeping the MAT intact, observation decks and all, as it was built in 39, is, in our view, essential and matters to aviation history for one single reason. Here, after World War II, the MAT served every international flag airline that launched ongoing scheduled aerial service to the world's greatest city. MAT was the U.S. connection to Europe from 1940 to the opening of Idlewild Airport, now JFK. So who started here? BOAC, Air France, that's British Airways, Air France, TWA, Scandinavian, American Overseas, Pan American, countless others. Look, the designers were Delano and Aldrich. They created all the original airport. They also created a sister building in Miami, Coral Gables, which is Miami City Hall. The actual Pan Am flying boat-based sister, designed by the same people that did MAT, the city council sits in the old departures area.
Mr. Arend, I have to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There will be more discussion on this matter, so
I'll listen. I'll submit my text, and I thank you for your kind attention. I hope we can save that building. Thank you very, very much, and best of luck.
Donna Mercurio? Serena Smith? David Hinson? And once again, Fernando Meza? Oh, okay. Okay, or Robert Jana? All right, is there anyone on the line that would like to make a statement that hasn't already spoken? Hearing none, I will adjourn this hearing. Thank you so much.